I stood there in the scorching sun, staring at my bone-dry irrigation ditch, my heart pounding harder than a jackhammer on pavement. My well had never run dry before, not even in the worst droughts, but now, with my crops on the brink of death and my livestock thirstier than a dog in a desert, my water was vanishing like a ghost in the night. I rubbed my temples, feeling the sweat trickle down my face. Something wasn't right. Someone was stealing my water. And when I found out who, they were going to pay, literally. It all started a few weeks ago when I noticed my well's water pressure dropping. At first, I thought it was just the summer heat taking its toll, but then it got worse. My irrigation system barely trickled out water, my cattle stood around their troughs in confusion, and my crops looked like they'd given up on life. I called a plumber, a grumpy old man named Earl, who stomped around my property, mumbling to himself while I followed him like a lost puppy. After an hour of inspecting pipes, he scratched his head and said, "Ain't no leak, Jake. You got yourself a thief." I laughed. A thief? Who in their right mind would steal water from a farm? Then, I stopped laughing because I knew exactly who. Karen Whitman, my delightful neighbor. A woman who had been a thorn in my side since the day she moved in. She complained about the smell of my farm, the unsightly view of my barn, and the early morning sounds of my rooster doing what roosters do. She was the kind of person who acted friendly to your face but would report you to the HOA for existing too loudly. And recently, she had installed the kind of backyard that made rich housewives on reality TV jealous. A lush green lawn. A massive koi pond. A ridiculous three-tiered water fountain that gushed water like it was in a Roman palace. During a drought. I had my suspect, but I needed proof. So, the next morning, I got up before dawn and followed the main waterline from my well. I crawled through bushes, over fences, and past the back of my barn, where I noticed something strange. A section of the underground pipe had been tampered with. My jaw clenched as I followed a newly laid PVC pipe stretching toward the property line. The closer I got, the more obvious it became. The pipe led straight to Karen's backyard, hidden under a layer of carefully placed mulch and decorative rock. The audacity. The sheer, mind-numbing gall. She had tapped into my well like it was her personal luxury water supply. I stood there, my hands on my hips, staring at the crime scene like a detective in a murder mystery. But instead of a dead body, there was just my stolen water, flowing freely into Karen's oasis while my farm dried up like an old sponge. I was torn between rage and laughter. Who even does this? Who looks at their neighbor's farm and thinks, you know what? That water should be mine. Oh, Karen was going to regret this. That afternoon, I decided to pay her a visit. I strolled up to her perfectly manicured front yard and rang the doorbell. It took a few seconds, but eventually, she opened the door, dressed in a flowy floral blouse, holding a glass of iced tea like she was the queen of the neighborhood. Her expression was sugary sweet, but her eyes darted around nervously. "Oh, Jake. What a surprise. What brings you here?" she chirped, flashing a too-wide smile. I leaned against her doorframe, pretending to admire the towering water fountain behind her. "Just came to ask if you've noticed anything weird about the water lately." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "The water? Yeah, you know. The stuff that keeps disappearing from my well. Thought you might have some insight since your yard looks like a tropical resort while mine's turning into a dust bowl." She laughed, too high-pitched, and waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't be silly. We've just been extra careful with conservation, that's all." I raised an eyebrow. "That right? Because it looks like your koi fish are getting daily spa treatments while my cows are looking at me like I owe them an apology." She blinked. "Jake, I really don't know what you're talking about." I studied her for a moment, then grinned. "Well, I guess I'll have to get the authorities involved. Maybe they can figure out where all my missing water's going." That wiped the fake cheer off her face real quick. Her eyes darted to the side, and she licked her lips. Now, there's no need for that. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm. I wasn't about to let her off the hook. But I wasn't going to confront her directly yet either. No, that would be too easy. Karen needed to learn a lesson she'd never forget. That night, under the cover of darkness, I shut off her little illegal pipeline. With a few twists and turns of the wrench, I sealed her stolen water supply tight. No more fountains. No more koi pond paradise. No more lush green lawn. I even took a step further, installing a small security camera aimed right at the buried connection spot. If she tried to mess with it again, I'd have hard evidence. The next morning, the screams started. From across the fence, I heard Karen's shriek of horror, followed by frantic shouting. "What is happening?" I sipped my coffee on my porch, watching the show unfold. Karen stomped outside, staring at her dried-up fountain like someone had just stolen her soul. Her sprinklers refused to turn on. Her koi pond had stopped refilling. Her lawn was already starting to brown under the sun's unforgiving heat. I waited. Sure enough, a few minutes later, Karen stormed over, her face red and sweaty, her designer sandals kicking up dust as she marched up my driveway. "Jake," she bellowed. I set my mug down, leaning back in my chair. "Morning, Karen. What's got you so worked up?" She crossed her arms. "Something's wrong with my water. It's just stopped." I pretended to think. Weird coincidence, seeing as I've been having water problems too. Her eyes twitched. "Jake, be serious. My fountain isn't working, my koi fish need water, and my plants are dying. What am I supposed to do?" I took a long, slow sip of my coffee. "Maybe call a plumber." She gaped at me like I'd suggested she sacrifice her firstborn. "A plumber? But that'll cost a fortune." I smiled. "Yeah, probably." She huffed, muttering under her breath as she stomped away. I watched her go, feeling the first taste of sweet, sweet justice. But this was only the beginning. Karen thought she could steal my water without consequences? Oh, she was about to learn that messing with a farmer's livelihood comes with a price. And it was going to be more expensive than she ever imagined. The morning after cutting off Karen's stolen water supply, I woke up feeling like a king. There was something deeply satisfying about knowing justice had started working its way through the system, even if Karen didn't realize it yet. I had barely finished my first sip of coffee when I heard her outside, losing her mind. It was even better than I had hoped. From my porch, I watched as she stomped around her yard, shaking her fists at her dried-up fountain like it had personally betrayed her. Her once pristine koi pond was now a sad puddle, the expensive fish flopping around as she scrambled to fill it with a garden hose that wasn't working. She fiddled with the knobs, tapping the spout like maybe, just maybe, it would magically start flowing again. But it didn't. Because I had made sure of that. She paced back and forth, clutching her phone, probably calling every plumber in town. It wasn't long before a white van pulled up, and a man in overalls stepped out, looking half asleep. Karen practically dragged him to her backyard, waving her arms wildly as she explained the disaster she was facing. I sat back, enjoying the show. It didn't take long before the plumber started shaking his head, pointing at the ground, and telling her something she definitely didn't want to hear. Her shriek carried across the yard. "What do you mean there's no connection to the city water line? That's impossible." I could see the plumber scratching his head, trying to figure out why this lady was acting like she had lost her life savings instead of just some stolen water. He said something else, and Karen's expression shifted from rage to something that almost looked like panic. She started pointing toward my property, her voice rising in pitch. There it was, the moment she tried to shift the blame. I took another sip of coffee. This was going to be good. A few minutes later, Karen stormed across the yard and right up to my porch. Her face was red, whether from anger or the heat, I wasn't sure. But judging by the way she was gripping her phone like she was about to throw it, I was guessing anger was winning. "Jake, I need to talk to you," she snapped, crossing her arms. "Right now." I leaned back in my chair, setting my coffee down slowly. "Morning, Karen. You look stressed." She took